Hi, everybody. I am Ben Devanzo. I am the new chair of the Crystal and Pentagon Cities Council. I wanted to start by expressing really deep appreciation for Mike Dowell, who had served in this role for quite a few years, as well as Krista All before him for many, many years. And I'm taking over people who are in many ways did a wonderful and potentially better job than me. I'll say that I'm going to ask everyone to do introductions who are CPC members or not, regardless, on the call. Just we have a small enough attendance that I think we can do so. I will also note that we will keep initial discussion or discussion on the topics to CPCC members. I'm not sure what we have for non-members on, but I think we're going to move to that kind of form of advisory body as this is, and I'll say a little bit of opening remarks after everyone does an introduction about kind of my direction for this before we kind of get to the agenda. So I will maybe ask, I'll perhaps go through, might be the best way, and call on people to introduce themselves and if you're a CPCC member and where you, which entity you are representing, or if you're staff, to note your role for the county board. And I'm just going to go in order of my my team's gallery. So that is Meg, Pam, and Carol. If you could please introduce yourselves.
Hi, everyone. My name is Meg Flores. I am the liaison from the Transportation Commission. I also live in Crystal City, so was excited to join this a year ago when I first started on the Transportation Commission.
Hi, Pam Van Hine. I'm representing Aurora Highlands Civic Association.
I'm Carol Fuller. Yeah, I'm Carol Fuller. I'm one of 3 Crystal City Civic Association representatives on the CPCC.
Next, we'll go Matt, Susan, and Mark.
Matt Ginnivan or Matt Matuzik?
Oh, Matt Matuzik. A lot of Matts involved with the CPCC.
Thanks for the clarification. Matt Matuzik with the Arlington County Planning Division.
Susan English. I'm one of 3 reps for the Arlington Ridge Civic Association.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Mark Dennis. I'm a landscape architect and planner with the Department of Environmental Services, and I'm project manager of the Transitway Extension Segment 2.
All right, now we will go with Matt G, Jeff, and then someone who's only listed as meeting guest unverified.
Hi, Matt Ginnivan. I'm one of the co-heads of our development group at JVG Smith.
Jeff,
I think you're muted.
Muted.
Hi, Jeff Williams, ARCA representative, 30-year resident of the James Building in the River House, and an Arlington resident since 1963.
You cut your hair. I don't recognize you.
I did. I got more than one cut.
Wow.
Summer cut.
Nice.
And then meeting guest unverified. Would you like to identify yourself if you're so desired? That's totally okay. I will assume that it's not someone who's a CPCC member. All right, so Patrick, Wes, and Harmer.
Hey, Patrick Philippi here representing Amazon. I lead our community engagement in the region.
Hey everyone, I'm Wes. I'm with Simon Property Group over at the Fashion Center in Pentagon City. Nice to see everyone.
Good to see everyone. Harmer Thompson with Elcor. Have the Sage Apartments and Altair Apartments, and also on the Crystal City bid board.
Thank you. Alex, Ashley, and Robert.
Hi, I'm Alex Chakrin. I'm part of the Aurora Highlands Civic Association, and I haven't officially been appointed. I think still, I think my nomination's pending. But I've been a resident here for about 2 years, but I've lived in Arlington for about 7. And excited to get involved, in the meetings here.
I think that brings it to me. Hi, everybody. Rob Mandel with the National Landing Bid. Happy to be here.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ashley Labadie with the National Landing Bid as well. I'm the Planning and Economic Development Senior Manager. It's nice to see everyone.
Sorry, guys. I relapsed and said Crystal City Bid. Sorry.
Really?
Shame, shame, shame.
I'm Robert Vaughn. I'm with Dweck Properties, and I'm the co-chair of the CPCC. And very excited for Ben to come on, take over, and provide leadership for the group.
Thanks, and we very much appreciate Robert staying on as co-chair, as vice chair. All right, Judy and Stacy, and well, Rob Mandel, you would have also been on this list, but you went because we also have too many Robs in this group. And I did not clarify which one I was talking about.
Yeah, Judy Freshman, Crystal City Civic Association.
Hi, this is Stacy Meyer from Aurora Highlands.
Great. Thanks so much, everyone. So I would, to keep our conversation functional, my request is going to be that we use the Teams raise hand function to note that you have a question you'd like to ask or a comment you'd like to make. I will also request that there be no conversation in the chat outside of technical assistance questions, which is standard per these sort of Arlington advisory bodies, and that we maybe remind folks of our names and affiliation just as when we ask questions or make comments. I'd also ask folks we have 3 agenda items to err on the side of waiting till the end of a presentation to ask questions or make statements, just to make sure we have a cohesive body. I do just kind of want to provide an opening note since this is my first meeting as chair. This is a unique advisory body, and I'm excited to be able to have a chance to contribute to it in this new way. We are the only advisory body that advises the county board about a specific neighborhood and about specific sector plans. And that provides us a really interesting opportunity to provide helpful insight on this kind of little corner of Arlington. And in providing insight to the county board really is kind of where I want to make sure we can go, that this is a advisory body to the county board. So ultimately, I'm really hoping that our conversations in the direction of our agenda items and topics go towards being able to provide advice to the county board. We are unique in that, right? The civic associations exist to provide voice for the residents in those, and the bid, the National Landing Bid, is often a voice for some, although not all of the businesses in the sector plans, just due to the way that the bid and sector plans map do and don't overlap. And my hope, therefore, is really to provide that intersection of where there is if not necessarily universal agreement, a general agreement on direction that the property owners, the businesses, the residents can kind of agree on. That is kind of where this unique body represents, right? We have representatives from all of those different types of entities, and we are actually missing a couple, have a couple open slots for businesses, and we are looking for, especially interested, I think, in retail businesses in the area. We are lacking and interested in recruiting additional membership for. But I will say, something you can really expect from me is really looking for how, and particularly within the charter, of the Pentagon or the Crystal and Pentagon Cities Council, which is really about monitoring growth and progress in the neighborhoods, and specifically around the sector plans as well as the comprehensive plan and the zoning ordinance. And so I think our conversations and focuses in the type of advice that we provide to the county board is going to be very focused on those. And certainly we are in a unique time where we have seen a lot of recent plans and county infrastructure coming through. There's a lot on the horizon, but perhaps paused for various reasons, the many kind of broader issues going on in the county and the country in terms of economics. And so as we kind of look for making sure that the conversations are productive, that we can actually find areas where there is useful advice, as things move to the county, for example, and there are sector plans or projects moving, that we can provide an idea of how things do or don't align with what the sector plans have to say, both in technical, word for word, as well as in the spirit of the sector plans, as well as, when there are deviations, how we feel about that. And again, we don't need universal agreement on everything, but I'm definitely looking for, especially across those different sectors, where there might be areas of a great advice and agreement that might be useful beyond the other existing advisory bodies and entities in this neighborhood and beyond. So you can expect me to be interested in that in particular. For example, an area I'm interested in talking about more and moving towards is this body doesn't actually have a formal voting mechanism. In the past, letters have been a little bit more vibe-based, which is not at all a bad thing. There's nothing wrong with that. Where letters have kind of, I think objections and previous chairs have worked on kind of writing letters on their own behalf that represent kind of how the conversations have gone. But we're not going to have that set up for this meeting, but maybe for future meetings, a ability to take a vote and have a position. So at least there can be some kind of a little bit more formal consensus described. This is not a little bit, this body is also unique in that it is not quite at the level of formality as, for example, certain commissions like the Planning Commission or Housing Commission or what have you. We're a council, which is, I guess it's a unique own other thing. And so that means we don't necessarily have that level of formality, but we can aim to, if not necessarily be required to achieve it, aim towards it as much as possible. So I really hope over the next coming meetings, over our quarterly meetings, or next one will be in September, for example, in person. Those are the sort of broad areas that I'm really interested in taking this body as developments happen. And again, really aiming for how can we be of use to the county board in ways that other bodies may not be able to do so, particularly to things that they are thinking through. And I see, Meg, you have your hand raised, so go ahead.
Just a point of clarification for accessibility. If we are saying acronyms, I think most everyone knows that BID is Business Improvement District, but as we talk for accessibility, if we can list out the acronyms as we speak them.
It's an excellent point. Thank you, Meg. I very much agree. This is, there are a lot of people involved in this who are newer, who may be newer for maybe the first meeting, as well as this is a recorded and publicly posted meeting. So absolutely, we want to make sure that anyone participating or viewing afterwards will be able to really benefit and understand the things we were talking about. So I agree with Meg with your point that we ask that as you were talking, please assume little prior knowledge, despite many of us being, for better or worse, steeped in the history of our neighborhoods. Okay, with that, I will turn to our first agenda item, which I think is an update on the 12th Street construction project.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining me here. I'd like to give what I hope is an informative update. This is based on a construction update we gave a couple months ago, so this may be repeat information for some of you, but I see a lot of familiar names and a handful of familiar faces, so hope this is still useful to you. We're talking tonight about the segment 2A of the Transitway extension to Pentagon City. And this project, as you may know, began many years ago. We've been working on this since about 2018. We completed segment 1. I don't know, can you see my pointer if I move this? Segment 1 was finished up in 2023, and we are now in segment 2A, which is the yellow box here on your screen. It's essentially the block between Eads and Fern along 12th Street. And just to touch on some of the objectives and scope items for this project, the main purpose of this obviously is to streamline and optimize transit operations through Pentagon City from Crystal City. Transit development and pedestrian improvements are top line items for us on this project. A number of street improvements as well to improve drainage and just general operations, including new signals and new signage. But the pedestrian environment is a priority item for us as well. So this is a continuation of several built examples we're working on right now for construction of what we would consider complete streets, where all user modes are essentially elevated and optimized for safety and efficiency. Just a quick visual overview of the corridor itself, the 12th Street corridor. I've kind of ghosted in the overall marking plan for this segment of the transitway. So plan left here, this intersection, the little dash box, that's the Hayes Street intersection. The box on the far right is the Eads Street intersection. The two boxes in the middle, the one to the left there in the center is Fern, and then the remaining box with the green highlighted areas, that's the Elm Street intersection. You can see in the renderings above these little snapshot sort of vignette views of our modeling of this project. You can see the various features. I've kind of highlighted a few in some of these callouts. And I'll be moving through sort of a graphic tour moving from east to west. So let's start with the block of Eads Street. This is looking west along 12th towards the intersection at Eads. You'll probably recognize the Whole Foods in the foreground, or the background rather. The tree area here, of course, is the Amazon parcel that's under development. And you can see in the foreground the block from Route 1 to Eads Street. You'll note here we're showing the full, complete build-out and markings with the bus-only lanes. This final segment of 12th Street between Route 1 and Eads, those markings will be part of the completion of this segment 2A between Eads and Fern, just to kind of call that out. Here's a view looking again from east to west, looking west at the intersection at Elm Street. And this highlights the kind of main event for this segment of the transitway, which is the pair of opposing raised bus islands. These include new bus shelters and all the amenities to make for a safe transition from the sidewalk zone to the bus entry zone. And you'll note the center running bus lanes as well as they transition across the intersection there. Additional improvements for this intersection include new signal upgrades, as well as new signage. And you'll note too that we're also retaining the parking along 12th Street on that south curb line. And the improvements to the north side eventually will be part of the Amazon development. Here's a view of that same intersection, just looking to the east. So this is just the other side of the intersection, just another view of those, close-up view of those bus islands. This is a view, again, looking from east to west at the Fern Street intersection. So you can see here that, again, the bus island or the center running bus lanes continue on into the next segment as they reach Hayes Street. Those markings on the Fern to Hayes block are also going to be part of this segment when it's complete. And you'll note here we're doing a full signal upgrade as well for the Fern Street intersection. In terms of our timeline, we essentially mobilized for construction in the spring, back in the March-April timeframe. We're currently right here, sort of midsummer or mid period between June and July, coming up on the end of our fiscal year. We're looking to stay on track to finish construction in the April timeframe next spring, and should be fully operational in this segment by the end of the summer. So I want to touch on probably the most important aspect right now for us on this segment is the maintenance of traffic. We call that the MOT plan. And this MOT plan is a pretty challenging aspect for this project. It's worth starting at the top here when we think about the closure that we all are very aware of that was called for in the plan. This was a recommendation from our traffic engineering team, and it was recommended as a way to optimize construction and minimize the overall length of disruption. These were some of the top line considerations in that thinking. And typically for construction projects like this, I'm sure a number of people on this call are aware of this, but we leave means and methods, including scheduling and sequencing of the work activities to the contractor. So recommending this full closure had that in mind, that the means and methods would be left to the contractor for efficiency's sake. This proposed closure is for a 12-month period, and we anticipate, based on our close coordination with the contractor and looking closely at their proposed baseline schedule, that all of the work in this segment can be completed within a 12-month timeframe. However, we are aware and very sensitive to the impact of a full closure. It's worth remembering that even though we leave means and methods and sequencing to the contractor, we are very closely coordinated with them. If there are issues that arise, if there are other challenges or problems that arise, we work closely through our construction management teams with the contractor teams to make continual adjustments as needed to keep safety and efficiency and the public sentiment in mind in terms of the impact for these construction efforts. So a couple of key points to keep in mind: road closure for public safety and for construction efficiency, again, just to summarize it, and then overall traffic management. These were the main issues driving that decision. The mitigation of risks in any construction zone includes maintaining safe pedestrian flow, using construction fencing and other safety devices to demarcate clearly and safely the work areas from active pedestrian areas. And it's worth noting that our intention and our plan going forward, we have this already worked out with the contractors, to maintain a consistent pedestrian access area along 12th Street for the duration of the project. Now, having said that, there are some changes in the works to achieve an even more optimal balance of construction efficiency as well as public safety. So we're currently revisiting the MOT in detail with the contractor and hope to implement some of these changes in a phased way, so that as the work is completed in a sequence of work that breaks it down by trade. For example, you might have all of the stormwater improvements come first, you might have electrical come second, you might do the heavy concrete work somewhere in the middle. Each of those may have a separate consideration for maintenance of traffic and for pedestrian flow. So those are some of the issues that we're looking at right now. In terms of our public engagement, I think everyone on this call is probably familiar with some or all of these methods that we use to keep the public looped in and to stay in touch with public concerns and issues. We provide regular status updates to the BID, to the Transit Advisory Committee, as well as civic associations. We use a number of traditional media and social media to get word out even more efficiently. So I know that was a fairly streamlined update. I'd like to take a moment to see if there are any questions.
I'll just say thank you for the presentation, and I'll say thank you to Diana as well, who has been providing weekly updates, I think per suggestion in the last meeting where we talked about this, which really does provide additional transparency and is a good practice. But before I'll give others questions before I ask any. So Jeff.
I walk the 12th Street, the south side of 12th Street, 3 or 4 times a week. There's kind of a pinch point there at Elm Street right now where you've got pedestrians kind of almost having to go single file across there. How long is that condition going to persist? I assume it's because of work you're doing at that point.
Yeah, that's a
some insight into that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So right at that particular intersection right now, we do have some very tricky kind of fine-grained installation work going on that involves cutting into the sidewalk zone. That work is being expedited right now, and so our anticipation is that the contractor can wrap up those installations. They're doing various things like relocating a fire hydrant and doing some other things, that they can wrap those items up very soon. I would say in the next week or so, we should see everything being closed up there, and that should help us open up that pedestrian zone just a little bit more so it's not quite so pinched. And you raise a good question I'd like to expand on just briefly, is that we think about the construction work as I mentioned, in kind of a phased approach. What we're looking at carefully with the contractor is helping them to understand if they can concentrate their efforts at a particular intersection or a particular corner of an intersection, quickly and efficiently get that done, and then get that kind of reopened, or at least not kind of closed down so it's too tight. But if they can keep that efficiency moving, the sooner we can get some of those items done and get some of those corners and intersections done, then we can move to the big ticket items like getting the main bus lanes paved. And once we get those paved, for example, that's an opportunity for us to reopen a lot of the MOT that's closed off. So I just wanted to expand on that for a second. Thanks for the question.
Yep, thank you.
Alexandra, and I'll just note, I should say, we had asked for conversation to be limited to CPCC members, but I'm comfortable given, you're nominated, you haven't been quite confirmed yet with you for the kind of purposes of asking questions and things like that is treated as such. So go ahead.
Sure. So I also, I think that, I think a lot of, attention was put into, the regular traffic patterns for this versus I think that the like pedestrian traffic, was kind of a little bit of a, it's a very busy route, and it sounds like, especially during like peak hours during, from like 7 to 9, they're doing like very heavy construction. If you ever go to Whole Foods very early in the day, there is, sometimes, someone right next to, so they're like cutting into the street, right where, there's, 50 people, walking. It's in a very small condensed space, trying to, for example, work during off hours where the, pedestrian traffic isn't so heavy, where you have too much, kind of going on within an enclosed space, as well as maybe opening up, portions of the road that might not being worked on, where it might be safe for some pedestrian traffic. Even if, there's nothing for, obviously, cars or buses, but just small walkways, that provide ways for, people traveling from the metro or to the metro, to whatever destination, whether it's Whole Foods or something else along that 12th Street corridor. So that's the recommendation, as well as, try to make sure, I guess this will feed into the transit discussion, but, making sure that a lot of those routes are, we're getting value for dollar from those bus stations that are put in there, and, frequent bus service, where those bus stations are being put in, and, the Metroway, the 42, the 43, are a couple that come to mind, the 7A, 22A, where these are frequent bus routes that, kind of bypass that little area.
Yeah, no, you've raised some really good points. To your comment about pedestrian access and just keeping that kind of optimized, Again, we work very closely with bridging between public meetings just like this and our construction management teams. And they're charged with constantly evaluating what's happening, when is it happening, what's the duration, what can we do to make sure the MOT is optimized at every step. So there have been a few hiccups along the way with this contractor. We're working closely with them to help them understand how we can kind of, seek that balance and tweak the sequencing of work. Maybe it's a time of day issue. Maybe it's making sure that we have additional staff on hand to flag and to kind of call things out as we're moving through there. But to the point of opening up additional work area to allow for more pedestrian traffic, that's a really good comment. But I will caution to say that in an active construction zone, especially where there's heavy equipment going on, and there's a lot of large, heavy installation going on, it really is a liability issue for the county. And so I think what I would do is I'm going to carry these questions and comments to our construction management team so that they at least understand what I'm hearing. But I'm going to leave the determinations about how much room does the contractor need to manage the equipment, the heavy equipment, the excavation, the delivery of large components that go in the ground, those sorts of things. We have to be very cognizant of the realities of heavy construction. So the sooner we can get those items in the ground, then we can really start addressing your immediate concerns about opening up more pedestrian area. So I appreciate that comment very much. We're gonna work closely with them to keep that top of mind. As far as the transit operations, I think those are very good observations. I'm not set to talk about transit operations. It's not quite my wheelhouse. But I appreciate the input on that nonetheless.
Thank you. Harmer.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, as it relates to the 12 months, what, if they had kept a lane open, what were the other, how much longer was it going to take in terms of, I mean, I understand means and methods, we have to do this all the time. If I gave all our contractors what they wanted, they'd take as much space as they humanly could take, because that's just the way they work. So whether it's means and methods or not, how much more would it take? Because we own 2 apartment buildings right there. The park is under construction. 11th Street shut down. Army Navy was under construction, and then they shut down 12th Street, which has become very inconvenient for obviously our project, so I'm sensitive to it. I know some of the other businesses in the area, and just curious, sometimes, maybe if it had to go 14 months and you could have kept one-way traffic or something in there, is there, do you have a sense for that, what the options were, or is that something that wasn't discussed?
No, that's a good question. It's a tricky question. I'm not sure I'm able to answer that with any degree of specificity, but if I put my contractor hat on, I could agree with you that the duration of the construction would be the moving variable on that, right? So it's a question that I would probably have to just hunt to the contractor to help me get an information from them to say, look, if you were to expand it 2 months or 3 months, what does that do to the cost of the project for you? So, I mean, that's kind of the balance that we have to strike between getting the work done as quickly as possible in the public interest against, again, kind of there are 2 ways to balance that public interest. It's either take longer and it costs more, or do it quickly and try to optimize cost and time.
And typically what we find is we typically can get them to get to the same timing, but anyway, because we're never given that much. And 12th Street is such a huge section. I mean, if you look at everything you showed, I mean, it's a massive section. I mean, it just seems to me like there are certain parts when you do stormwater management that you would take up a lot of the road, but that's very specific. And it just looks like there would have been room, in my opinion, based on what we've seen, to have left at least a one-way path that could have been next to the pedestrian traffic, which would have given it a nice buffer zone. I think the ship sailed. So you probably heard from a few of us in the community, but
absolutely.
I understand. I just had to at least ask the question.
Yeah, no, I very much appreciate the level of concern. It's very important to us to make sure we're taking whatever steps we can to be responsive to that. It's worth bearing in mind that for this project we are doing improvements curb to curb, and some of those improvements extend beyond the curb. We have to work in the sidewalk zone in order to get some of these things done properly. The degree to which the storm on the south side, for example, that's necessarily going to impinge on that pedestrian zone. We simply have to allow that kind of lateral area for them to work safely. Once that stuff is in, again, then it becomes a little bit of a nuanced, different discussion that we can have on how to adjust that MOT. And again, once the heavy paving is in, that changes it up again. So there may be some changes coming here in the coming months where we can begin to revise and have a better, clearer vision on how that MOT can take shape to everyone's benefit.
Right. I appreciate that.
Okay, Pam. You are on mute, Pam.
But I turned my video on. Sorry about that. Hi, Mark. It's nice to see you again, and thank you for your presentation.
Likewise.
My question is about your tree protection boxes, which seem to be more and more as we go along. I assume that the tree protection boxes are going to be fairly stable for the next year. They're not going to be taken down or moved or anything. Is there a way that we can make them more beautiful? We paint them or something? I don't know if the county can do that or the bid can do that, but it looks like a construction zone all along South 12th Street. And there are a lot of businesses that are trying really hard to stay open. And with the tree boxes, it's not the right look. So if either the bid or the county can work together to do something, that would be fantastic. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Pam. That's a really good point. It's something that comes up a lot on these large projects. We had it come up on the Army Navy Drive project. The boxes are a county requirement. They are installed at the determination of our urban forestry team. It's their call to require either the boxes or the fences. And typically, it's a rule of thumb. I can't really speak for them in detail, but it's a rule of thumb that the heavier construction items right there near the tree zones will require those plywood boxes. And in terms of beautifying them, that's absolutely a viable option. It's something that we have in previous projects over the years worked with the various bids to do those kinds of improvements. I know we did some in the Roslyn area. So these are things that we can definitely work closely with the bid to help facilitate. It's not something that the county is typically taking on fully, so we would work closely with the bid on those things. And I will add, just on the beautification note, one thing that we are actively working with the bid right now to do, and we're doing some things internally, we've recently had the contractor hang the black fabric on the construction fencing, but we're also working to produce some large vinyl banners to hang on those fence panels to help provide a visual illustration and information and just general PR boost, public image boost to what's coming, what people can look forward to, and when. And so we're going to be working closely with the bid to get that going here very soon. So
thank you.
Thanks for the question.
And one of the points should be that businesses are open. I don't know if you can add that to it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rob, and then I'll maybe have a question, and then I think we need to move to the next topic.
Yeah, I was just going to add to Mark's response. We have already been engaging with the county on some ideas around sprucing up those boxes and sprucing up the fence. So Mark kind of touched on it, but we did also put that offer in there. And I have been out for 2 weeks, so I'm not entirely up on it, but I will check on it tomorrow.
That's great. Thanks, Rob.
Thanks. So my question is is a little broader, which is why obviously this has been a project where the length and the extent of it has, both residents and property owners and retail folks, going to where this body adds some value, a little bit concerned. And I have heard, I've talked with the business owners along the strip, and they have seen a reduction in revenue, which, you know, we want to make sure we support our retail businesses in the neighborhood. And I'm wondering if there are lessons learned or ways that this sort of, right, it is, as you say, a curb to curb project, but a way that this type of thing in a neighborhood where construction is heavily impacting travel, residents, bike riders, transit users, retail businesses all over the neighborhood. And we really do want to find ways to minimize that. If there are ways, either lessons learned or a process that maybe we could request for lessons learned to avoid such a disruptive impact down the road for any other either county or private property owner led project.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. That's a really good point. Lessons learned, that's something that we're already discussing from the top of our Division of Transportation all the way down to the project level. So we are looking carefully at how, for example, the MOT for this plan was conceived, how it was structured, how it was implemented. We're trying to evaluate better ways to kind of flesh out the nuances that we anticipate. What can we expect to see during a project of this type when it's being built, and then get that built into the bid, into the plan, into the information that gets into the hands of the contractor, so that the bid that we get back, the contract that gets established, incorporates those nuances earlier and more clearly and more firmly, so that the expectations are there at the outset. I think in this project, for reasons I don't quite yet have a handle on, but I suspect it's just in the scrum of construction work, it got lost somehow. That did not make it through full translation to the contractor. So we've had to play a little bit of catch up, working closely with them. It's a relatively new contractor to projects of this scope. They've done a lot of work with the county in a lot of different settings, and a lot of great work, but this is one of their first big projects with the county. So we've had a few growing pains, but we're definitely taking note of making those lessons learned clear and sharing them up and down, all the way down to the project level. So that's our hope, and I'm optimistic we can make a better process for the next time we do a project like this.
Thank you. And really appreciate you spending your evening outside of normal work hours giving us this information.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure.
All right. With that, we will move on to our next agenda item, where we've asked JBG, right? There's a couple of big projects that they have moving forward, both with River House, which is itself going through the SPRC process, as well as a couple of conversion projects along Crystal Drive. Right, we're not at the point, right, where the CPCC is being asked to provide any formal input to the county. That would happen should these go to the board, right? And the conversion project is a unique new process that the county board recently approved that not everyone may be familiar with. So we've asked kind of JBG to provide us just with some, both there's a lot of very interesting, I think, specific things to these projects, right? Just so everyone knows where these two are headed and how they align or don't with the sector plan, but also some, I think, interesting broader economic trends that could be spoken to for both of these and kind of where they're coming from. So Matt, can I hand it over to you?
Absolutely. Thank you. So let me pull up my screen here.
And I should say I used an acronym, and Meg posted this up, but I also used this chat. A site plan review committee, which is the official planning commission subcommittee that reviews specific projects that has representatives from both the planning commission across Arlington and the specific stakeholders in a neighborhood where it's moving.
Great. Well, thank you, Ben, and I'll hop right in here. So again, for those I've met before, Matt Ginnivan, one of the co-heads of our development group here at JBG. And as Ben alluded to, I'm here to talk about two of our projects tonight, our adaptive reuse applications as well, the River House neighborhood. I do always get questions on what's going on in the office market, so have just a couple slides on that as well, because I think it's an important context for the adaptive reuse applications in particular. As I'm sure some people on this in this meeting are painfully aware, but others may be more tangentially aware. The office market in across the U.S., but in the D.C. metro area in particular, is in a very significant downturn. We've had 5 straight years of rising vacancy and negative net absorption, meaning for 5 straight years, more tenants have moved out of space than have moved in. And I think we used to throw around terms like it's the worst since the great financial crisis. Now you can go back much further. You can go back to the tech wreck of the early 2000s, and the vacancy rate is higher, and absorption is still negative. And then in addition, all the various both real and perceived risks from DOGE and other federal budget uncertainty has impacted not just the leasing of buildings, but also the capital markets willingness to support leasing. So think about lenders or investors who provide the capital to support office buildings and the attraction of tenants. Within our national landing portfolio, we've been relatively protected in that we do have a high concentration of defense and defense associated contractors who have been less affected by a lot of the budget uncertainty and are relatively stickier because they make significant investments into their office buildings in the form of SCIF, which is secure, compartmentalized, intelligent facilities, a lot of infrastructure that they put into those buildings. But we've still seen a fair amount of reduction in occupancy within our own portfolio. So as of the end of the first quarter, our national landing office portfolio was 78% leased, and that's versus 86% just a year prior. Now, a big portion of that we knew was moving out, and that was the successful delivery of Met Park for Amazon. And so they vacated a lot of interim space that they had within our portfolio. And that's why we had a very low retention rate in 2024. And a retention rate, sort of as it suggests, is the number of tenants who renew in place versus vacate. And we historically have averaged sort of around a 65-70% retention rate. And in 2024, our retention rate was only 40%. So that's sort of the bad news. But within that, we do see sort of the green shoots and we hope the signs of a turning recovery in the office market. Despite that increase in vacancy within our own portfolio, we also had the strongest year of leasing since the pandemic. So 320,000 square feet of new leases. So that's the strongest year of new leasing that we've had since before the pandemic. And 2025 is off to a slower start, but the forward pipeline looks promising. What's important, though, in all those numbers is that 78% occupied is after reducing our office stock by over 1 million square feet that we've taken out of service. So if you were to add that back into our office portfolio, we'd be only 60, sort of mid 60% occupied. So that's why the adaptive reuse really is a critical tool to both reduce vacancy by taking office buildings out of the denominator, but then also add amenities to the neighborhood to actually strengthen the office that remains. And I think despite all those macro headwinds, a really important thing is that JBG, we do have the ability and the willingness to continue to invest in the office portfolio to attract and retain new tenants. Since going public, we've spent over $500 million in the existing office portfolio. And despite these sort of adverse macro headwinds, we've continued to make investments. One of the most significant ones we recently or we're going to be delivering at the end of the year. If you've seen the construction fencing at the base of 2011 Crystal Drive, where we're spending $40 million at the base of that building. And it's really all about creating the next generation of office amenities that are relevant to office tenants coming back, trying to bring folks back to the office. And there's a lot of different amenities in there, food and beverage, small meeting space, but really the key offering that we're trying to provide to our office tenants is large meeting space. That's really what's in short supply in the market. So we've actually been taking out columns of the base of that building, transferring those loads out, which is quite an engineering feat, to create rooms that are sized to accommodate 50, 100, even a 300-person conference room at the base of the building. Recently branded the Concord. We had a soft launch last month, and are looking forward to opening that up January. So that's an example of adapting an old office building, but maintaining it as office and just sort of changing the amenity base to make that relevant. But there are some office buildings that we don't think have that ability. And two of those are 2100 and 2200 Crystal Drive. 2100 Crystal Drive was one of the buildings that Amazon was in as temporary swing space, and then 2200 Crystal Drive previously had a variety of tenants, some government contractors, some government agencies. We only have one tenant remaining in there, and anticipate that they'll be vacating either end of this year or early next year. So that's 500,000 square feet of office buildings that are completely vacant. And they're really functionally obsolete as well. They're an older vintage of office buildings. They don't have a great amenity base. They have compromised ceiling heights, a relatively tight column grid, and so we've been investing in the office buildings that we think we can make relevant. These are ones that we identified as great candidates for adaptive reuse. And so we were actually the first application to file under the county's new adaptive reuse ordinance at the end of last year. We've been working through all of our comments with staff and are progressing towards county board hopefully next month. And so what we'll do with that adaptive reuse is we'll take those two office buildings and transform them, 2100 Crystal Drive into a 333 key hotel. And that's going to not just, again, take out the office, but it's going to add a new amenity. And it's something that we've heard from a lot of our office tenants is a major pain point for them, both existing and prospective tenants. The fact that we don't have a lot of new hotel keys in the market. And that'll actually be two brands. An extended stay brand will take the bottom half of the building, and then an upper upscale boutique brand will be at the top of the building. 2200 Crystal Drive will be one that, and 2100 Crystal Drive, we're the lead on the application, but that's one where we have a partner identified who will be the hotel developer and will manage all the relationships with the brand that they're bringing in. 2200 Crystal Drive, that will be converting to residential, and that's something we'll be doing ourselves. And one of the lessons we learned in working with this building and preparing it preparing our design for adaptive reuse is we found that in a lot of ways the most efficient and cost-effective strategy in converting this to residential was to not sort of fight the building and try and force a typical high-rise apartment unit into these buildings, but to sort of work within the existing structure. Interestingly, what that has led us to is a significantly larger unit type in this building as compared to our new high-rise buildings, which tend to be around 750 square feet on average, and have a mix of studios and junior ones and some twos. This building will have the average unit size will be over 1,000 square feet rentable on average, and there's no studios and a pretty healthy mix of twos and threes, which is interesting and something that we found it both reduced the cost of the conversion, but also allowed us to deliver a differentiated unit type that's not going to be competitive with the new high-rise buildings that we've just delivered, and will also allow us to retain folks in the neighborhood or attract a different demographic to the neighborhood who otherwise the option might not be here for them. Another critical part of the adaptive reuse is reorienting these buildings. A little bit of history. These buildings were built by Charles E. Smith way back when, before Crystal Drive even existed. And so the entries of these buildings were built on the plaza side, fronting the Crystal Plaza apartments, elevated from Crystal Drive. And the retail that you see at the base of these buildings was actually a subsequent addition, where there used to be a above grade parking deck at the base of these buildings. But what that meant was that these buildings, the lobbies for them have never been oriented towards Crystal Drive. And that's something we'll change with this reclaiming and reusing the former entries to the underground shopping mall and turning those into the lobbies directly fronting onto Crystal Drive. And we think that'll just really build upon the success that we've added on the rest of Crystal Drive. Over the past couple of years, we've added 55 new retailers to Crystal Drive, and anyone who's been there recently knows how different it's really starting to feel as all those shops open, all the residents move into the new residential towers, and we think this will just further strengthen that transformation. So that's 2100 and 2200, and then on to River House, where we are applying for and I'll have to remember what PDSP stands for, a phased development site plan and a 4.1 site plan. The phased development site plan covers the entire site and provides sort of macro planning guidance. And then the 4.1 are the buildings that we anticipate building in sort of the near term. So the site, has a rich history. It was built in the 1960s by the Kafritz family. It was built before Metro existed, so they built it with a pretty high parking ratio. There's over 1,800 parking spaces on site today, and I think around 1,100 of them are actually utilized. You can see that in the top left. It's also been through a lot of different planning processes. Even before we became JBG Smith, our predecessors at Vornado had filed a plan back in 2016. We amended that plan in 2018 and filed that. But then after we won Amazon and brought in HQ2, we took a pause, worked with the county to replan the area as part of the sector plan, filed a plan under that in 2022, and spent really 2 years working through the long range planning committee, which deals with sort of the overarching typologies and building footprints of the site, and then before moving on to site plan review. And obviously won't go through all those changes tonight, but I think it's been a really interesting push and pull of balancing a lot of different ambitions and desires for the site. But this is where we are right now and where we're progressing through site plan review committee. And again, won't go through all the various changes we've made, but I think some of the biggest changes we made in our most recent site plan review, which some of you have been participated in, was really about increasing the amount of open space, opening up view sheds, and also trying to strike a balance between the near-term buildings, which we intend to build, the townhomes and some of the mid-rise multifamily, while still providing the opportunity for long-range growth through higher-rise buildings that we can build in future phases. And this represents that first phase I'm talking about, the 4.1, which are the phases that we believe will build in sort of the near term. Starting from south to north, 127 townhome and townhome style condos, transitioning to the single family and duplex buildings to our south, sort of a neighborhood scale multifamily building. And then directly across from Pentagon Rows, where we have a large mid-rise building with ground floor retail right at the base of that. And then those future phases, which are covered in the PDSP or phase development site plan, are ones where we're not anticipating filing for building permit, anytime soon. But this provides the planning framework for us to come in the future and file for those future 4.1s. Some rendering of those buildings from around the site. And with that, I can take questions.
Thanks so much, Matt. As folks consider this, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, timeline-wise, the thinking is for the adaptive reuse, those are probably going to be reviewed in some way by the county board, and I'm looking to Matt M for confirmation or not of this process, as well as for River House, probably more looking in the mid-fall, potentially after our September meeting.
Yeah, that's right. July is when we're hoping to get to the board on the adaptive reuse. River House, likely September.
Great. see Patrick, and then Carol.
I really just had a thank you to Matt. I really appreciate the new hotel. I know you've probably heard this from Amazon people from different channels, but just heard a lot from different fair or not unfair people visiting that they want a new hotel option. So a thank you.
We have heard that. Yeah, that's the pain point I'm referencing. Yeah, and and I think that it hurts, right, when people visit and they stay at the wharf or they stay in Old Town, and we want them to stay in the neighborhood. So
people that come to all of our offsites, they're always staying at the wharf. I don't know why I try to, but anyway, so thank you for that.
Carol.
With respect to the adaptive use, just to get it on the record for the CPCC, what Matt already has heard from Livability is that we do not think that it's a great idea for a hotel there not to have an underground access to the metro or to the underground. We understand that that has to deal with the hotel rules and regulations or whatever you called it, but I wanted on the record that we think that that's a bad idea.
Yes, fair. Yeah. We presented to the Civic Associate, or I don't know if we've done a full presentation of Civic Associate. I think we did, right? Yeah. Or no, sorry,
it was,
3CA.
It was the Livability that.
Yeah. We're still trying to get our full public one scheduled. I think the last time we did it, we accidentally conflicted with primary so I guess we were going to do it tomorrow. But anyway, so that is one of the challenges here is in order for us to have those lobbies on Crystal Drive, one of the elements of the building that we are reusing is those entries to the underground. And one of the concerns we've heard is that closes access to that portion of the underground. For better or worse, we've gone through a lot of iterations of the lobby design there. For the hotel lobby in particular, that's one that's really not within our control. Even the hotel developer, they're really working with the brand, and the brand has very specific brand standards, and they were not comfortable with having that back door to their lobby, and so that's sort of a very firm line for them.
Yeah, I just wanted to get it on the record that we
appreciate it. Yep,
bad idea.
Alexander.
So this is a small thing, but it's something that has come up a lot amongst friends actually, and it's just a very local thing. But there's this railing, and it's a very important staircase because it is the connection between South Joyce and South Lynn Street. And there's a large staircase that connects there, and it's kind of fallen into a state of disrepair. And if you don't, there's almost no connection otherwise between the streets.
Yeah.
So it's definitely, just been a point of contention amongst friends, some who live in, the condo complex. I think it's like the Cavendish and a couple of ones on South Arlington Ridge, just to get that into a better state of repair, because it's a very important connection for people who live on that street.
Yeah, not a small thing at all. And I can talk with our property management team about some interim repairs. That is part of the overall plan, though. With our redevelopment, is that we will create a new 100% accessible connection between Joyce and Lynn. So it's a lot, as you know, it's a lot of grade to traverse. But we are able to figure out a system of we'll have new stairs that'll provide more direct connection, but a series of ramps that will allow connection from Joyce up to Lynn, focus on getting to that bus stop right there.
All right, Robert V.
Thanks, Matt. Quick question. By relocating the lobbies to Crystal Drive, are you guys proposing any changes or reimagining to the plaza space, given that it won't really serve as the building entry anymore?
We're not, as part of this application. I think it's something that we would be interested in looking at. There's sort of a thicket of easements up there that we would need to work through. So not as part of this application.
Okay, thanks.
Stacy.
Sorry, I lost my mouse. I have a couple of questions. One is, I know it's a brief presentation, but I was wondering if you had the information about what the sector plan was calling out for those two buildings in Crystal City. I couldn't remember if it was towers there or if those buildings were intended to always sort of stay the same. And then the second question I had was, I agree on the walkway between Joyce and Lynn. There's just such a huge opportunity to do something nice there that I know at one point a long time ago there was even a little waterfall that was on there. I'm not suggesting that you do a waterfall, but there's just a huge opportunity to do something cool there and make it a really nice experience. And the third thing is, you did, and I know it's a brief presentation, but would like to see if you could just point to how the traffic's flowing in and out of this River House development.
Sure. So I'll take this sort of in reverse order. On River House, we have our upcoming site plan review committee number 3, I think is our number. Yeah, no, sorry, 4 on June 26th. And I'm just going to drop a link to our site page into the chat here. And that one will be focused on transportation. So we'll go into that very, very much in detail. Those materials should be posted next week, I think, because our meeting's on the let me see if it's 25th or 25th. On the 26th, next Thursday. So we should have those materials posted by Monday on that page. And then we also have on that page, I believe soon, there'll be a link for our open space planning, which is running concurrent with the land use planning. And really the one open space it's really focused on is the open space across from Pentagon Row. And that includes basically a lot of that connection from Joyce to Lynn. So I don't know if yeah, I'm not sure we'll add a waterfall back, but exactly that type of, comment and ideas on ways to make that not just functional, but beautiful, are very much welcome there. And then on the sector plan for 2100, 2200, I believe there was additional height, or there is additional height allowed on the sector plan, but they were not in sort of those illustrative plans ever shown as being redeveloped. But sort of a technical but meaningful distinction about the adaptive reuse ordinance is that we're not rezoning the site to go to the CO Crystal City and add the additional height and density. It really is just a reuse of the existing structure under the existing land use framework.
And I definitely do encourage folks for a more detailed review of the River House project, to attend and review those SPRC site plan review committee meetings. Pam.
Hi, thank you for your presentations, Matt. Very useful. I want to raise an issue for the record that came up with the JVG Smith's livability meeting last week, and that is the streetscape for the 2100, 2200 project, and specifically how you're going to be providing PUDO for the hotel. It's going to be a huge issue. It's going to be people needing to be picked up, dropped off all the time. And as you know already, PUDO is a problem on Crystal Drive. People double park, whatever. It's going to take a lot of work between you and the county, but you're going to need to develop some space specifically for that. Thank you. And this will be a topic at our meeting when we have it.
Yes. Thank you. And as we said, then we really agree with that comment, and certainly our hotel partner agrees with that as well. And something we've been really focused on. We've in our plans that we've submitted with the county, we have shown streetscape modifications. Yes, for the pickup drop off for the PUDO, and we're the first application to come under this new adaptive reuse ordinance. And there's sort of a technical question of, should streetscape changes be included in these or not, given that it's an adaptive reuse of the building? It's not to say that we would not continue to pursue those. It's sort of a question of what's the horse and what's the cart. Should we get our land use change first, and then we'll have time, right? We've still got all the design and permitting, and then the construction period to figure out what the exact right solution is with staff. So I don't know where we're going to shake out, but that's sort of the tension is, do we include it in this? Do we include the detailed solution in this approval, or do we get the use change and then spend the next 12 to 18 months working with staff to fine tune that? But I think everyone agrees that that's important.
Yeah, I think what Judy suggested in the meeting was putting it in the site plan conditions to make sure it happens.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, we'd be fine with that. Yeah, we're trying to actually put it into the site plan drawings to show that, and
Good.
there's just sort of a technical question that we're working on with staff there.
Thank you.
Jeff.
Yeah, I saw Pam's notes on the livability on the Pudo issue, and I started noodling around in Google Earth looking at that. And one of the things I noted is that that hotel entrance is going to be right across from where your new office center is going to be. And I think that's also where CC to DCA is going to be. And there's eventually going to be an Amtrak stop. So it seems to me that that area could be very busy for pickup and drop-off activity for lots of different users in the area. And so maybe that circulation that goes kind of behind the restaurant and where you are, you should be thinking holistically about what's that traffic flow going to look like? Where are the holding areas going to be? How are people going to move? If they can't park in front of the hotel entrance, is there going to be a holding area? In other words, I think you should be looking at that as a kind of a whole area thing. I mean, they're not going to come in at the same time, but they're all going to impact one another. That's my comment.
It's a good flag, and thank you for that. And we are thinking about it that way, but it's always worth restudying and making sure that we're doing all those turning analysis and queuing analysis. I think that specifically that proximity to CC to DCA is really what attracted the hotel developer and brand to that specific building versus 2200. They really love that idea that they are on access with that access. The other side of the street does fare a little bit better because we do have the U-shaped or C-shaped frontage there, which does allow for a decent amount of queuing and sort of storage space for the various taxis and Ubers and black cars that we see coming there, but the demand's only going to go up. You're 100% accurate there.
Carol, and then I'm going to pose a question for the group to consider.
Okay, well, I wanted to know whether I have a sector plan question for Matt on a different project, which I can hold off, but I wanted to know when I should ask that.
So not for River House or for the.
No, it's the 101 South 12th Street. I can just ask it very quickly if you want me to, but basically, sure. They have been cutting down trees in that park, and it looks terrible. They've really just massacred the trees, and people are complaining and asking why, if you have just asked for an extension of your site plan on that sector plan area, why are you cutting trees down?
That is something I'm totally unaware of. There's no development reason we're cutting trees down. So I don't know if that. Let me follow up with our asset management, property management team. There might be some landscaping.
I sent an email today, but got no answer. So if you could check,
okay,
please.
I will.
Thank you.
So something I'd like, given that the River House project will not be coming before the board until after a September meeting, my hope is that in September, this group can come to either through a formal vote or not, depending on how we are situated, a viewpoint of the CPCC on that project, its alignment, its positives, negatives, in terms of where there is alignment, not necessarily among everyone, right? I don't think JBG has its own point of view, but beyond that, where we could provide some direction and thought to the county board about in terms of alignment with the sector plan and beyond, where the Civic Association certainly will and do, and I know there's many residents that have strong opinions about that project. but from a CPCC point of view, provide hopefully some guidance so that I'd love to be able to have myself or a CPCC representative. I know Jeff is our CPCC rep on that project. Be able to go to the county board meeting and provide a viewpoint to again be able to provide that advisory committee role. So something for folks to keep in mind heading into our September meeting. The other thing I was going to say is, right, this adaptive reuse project, we are not going to have a chance to be able to provide much of an opinion on. I was going to clarify, right, this is unlike, and this is intentionally, right, this process that, or lack thereof, that the county set out, which is, right, there's no site plan review committee, there's no public review process or comment, right? This is a administrator or primarily administrative process. Staff reviews the plans and then it goes to the county board for, I guess by their discretion, either a formal agenda item or a consent agenda item. Is that kind of correct? Either the Matts or someone can confirm.
Yeah, that's my understanding of it as well. Yeah, the idea sort of going back to the last year, right, when the policy was being drafted, was sort of similar to the renovations we're doing at 2011, Crystal Drive, or anytime we change an office tenant. It's really that we want that flexibility of it's not changing the overall structure or the massing or the height, and it's just changing that use on the interior. So it's meant to sort of more closely align with that. It's still a little bit heavier lift. I don't actually know that it can go on consent. I think it does have to be considered on the main agenda. And I expect it will be as the first one. But yeah, the idea was for it to be more akin to when we're pulling a TI permit and changing, the use inside of a building rather than a wholesale redevelopment.
So I think the question I would pose, and again, I don't think we're going to be able to have consensus quite on like the full details of the project, everything, the value and benefits of it, but rather, right, obviously, this is, as you said, you are all the first one, and maybe we can provide some input or county board about, right, this complex area where ordinarily in a site plan review committee, you would review alignment with what the sector plan says and be able to have a conversation about like this issue around the underground and the underground entrances or the streetscaping, or I don't know, to the extent you're changing sidewalk lengths, width and things like that, and how if we have, right, with the county clearly having a priority where it wants these to be able to move more quickly to be able to meet its various economic and housing goals, but and not adding additional, well, maybe potentially adding additional process points that might be complex and undermine that, but at the same time, not foregoing the ability to do these kind of discussions, at least that you would have on a normal site plan. And I'm just kind of interested in if there are, not even necessarily on this one specific project, right? But we have a lot of potential older buildings that are potentially good candidates for adaptive reuse, and I think we would want to be able to provide some input either now or in the future after this, if it is a little bit too late to provide input on this specific process, so we can provide some guidance to the county board on if there's any tweaks or things to keep in mind. And I'd invite some comments on that from any variety of spectrums in support or in oppositional to CPCC playing some sort of advisory role around that. And I see, Stacey, you have your hand up.
Oh, hey, yeah, I was just wanting to say, because I had asked the question about the adaptive reuse project. There is one, I'm supportive of it. I love the idea of adaptive reuse, but there is one thing that does come up when you change the use of a building, especially from office to residential, is, it's the impacts on the county services for libraries, parks, and schools. And so usually you would have at least part of that discussion in a SPRC process. That's not going to happen. So it sort of creates a one-off situation where we're not having that discussion as part of this project. And I was just thinking about it because I was trying to remember the sector plan, and I went to the sector plan and I remembered that on page 78 of the sector plan, there's, a diagram that shows, all of the parks, all the public parks that are in our neighborhood in Aurora Highlands and that are used in a 10-minute walk from this development. And it seems like, the Crystal City Sector Plan, the implementation matrix, had sort of this quid pro quo of the county upping the services for the density along with the development. And I guess that conversation's not being had. So that's just one thing I'd like to hear more about. And Ben, I like the idea of what you're suggesting about having a position, but pretty diverse group. Are you thinking that there would be an opportunity for sort of like maybe the Supreme Court where they have like a position and then a dissenting view, or, would it be more, or is it just like yay or nay, or how are you gonna plan to manage that?
I think
Those are my
typically
questions.
letters, it's a good question. Typically letters are represent this is what many people think, this is what some people thought, as a sort of representing the variety of viewpoints in them, and ideally drafted and provided with, anyone who wants to provide input with the chance to do so. And would aim for either that, or whether it's a letter or a comment when the county board is considering. I think, Meg, you put your hand up and down. So you are, I don't know, I'll go to you first because you technically had it.
It keeps automatically removing my hand for some reason. But I was going to say I remember when we were presented with this from staff, and it is inherently about fast tracking in a way where we can reuse these old buildings. I don't disagree, though, that there needs to be some feedback, and the poll on services is not a small one. I don't remember there being any conversations about how we would then go about revitalizing services in a way that, we would normally cover in an SPRC. So yeah, I definitely would be interested in partaking in some sort of feedback loop for county board on this process, especially since we do have the unique opportunity of having the first one be in our neighborhood.
Armor, yeah, very interested in your all point of view.
I'll take the development side of this. First thing is, I was one of probably the few people who were involved with the sector plan. And if you go back and you dust off the sector plan actually called for what's happening now, actually a lot more than actually what's happened, which is a lot more residential. So all the infrastructure and everything else that we're looking at is something that was anticipated. So I'm not sure that, we need to revisit every time, especially on an adaptive reuse, what the impact is going to be, because I think it's actually something that we all called out and really wanted was more of a balance between residential and office. And the second thing is, especially since this one is being converted to a hotel, I don't know if people really understand the implication, which is there are so many taxes that will come. You've got an empty office building that's generating no tax revenue to speak of. It's only going the wrong way. And you're bringing a hotel in, which is going to generate huge, tax revenue, real estate, sales tax, hotel taxes. I mean, it's a huge boom for the area. Obviously, if it's residential, still, you're going from a situation. So it's not like the county is getting a lot more tax revenue, and hopefully that tax revenue is going to go to, counteract a lot of the impacts that you're bringing to light. So I think, it's a much better thing that you can, as a developer, that you can have the assurance that you can fast track a deal, right? Otherwise, it's not going to happen, and you're not going to get the additional revenue. So I think the additional revenue, when you look at it, is way outweighs the impact that you're going to see from these projects, because they're not adding height, they're not adding additional density, and there's less traffic impact than an office building. So there's benefits that you haven't looked at. So anyway, I figured I'd take the development perspective. So there it is.
Thank you. That's exactly why we have these different viewpoints here, to learn from each other. Robert.
So I will take the development perspective first, and then the adjacent property owner perspective second. Rather than, I do think that it's worth highlighting potential conflicts to the board and having the board provide clarity on how they're going to adjudicate them, given that this is a new policy. That I think as a developer, what you want most is clarity on what the process is going to be. And you would hate for this to go through, and then the next time this goes through, a similar but slightly different issue pops up and is ruled in the other way. Because then nobody actually knows what the ground rules are. So like the underground sector plan priority, I think it's worth highlighting, and the board needs to come down and say, hey, how do we balance these two competing priorities? And how would that be applied in a future scenario? And I think there's probably a handful of those within the application that exists and the sector plan guidance that exists for, and I don't know that the CPCC needs to take a specific view on those. Maybe they can, or maybe there can be competing views. But I do think it's worth raising to the board and asking the board to say, hey, these are real issues that would have come up during sector plan. They're not coming up during sector plan. So you need to kind of provide some guidance for how these are going to be dealt with moving forward. And then taking the adjacent property owner perspective, this process doesn't allow an adjacent property owner who might be impacted to have a role in the process. And for this one, right, I think that the impact might be very small. If this was applied in a different setting or scenario, the impact might be much more significant. And I do think that there should be some conversation to be had between how the building is developing and how it's going to affect the adjacent property owners. Now, whether the board wants to say, hey, that's between private property owners, we're not going to deal with that, I think that's fine. But I do think that's another question, because ultimately, you know, if taxis queue up on Crystal Drive, everybody's going to go yell at staff, right? People aren't going to go yell at the hotel operator. And so whether, like, again, the board needs to come down and say, hey, how are we going to rule on this? Again, more for consistency for how the policy is going to be applied moving forward than necessarily for this specific application.
So just thinking about rounding out, like, what do you folks think about when this comes before the county board, CPCC, maybe in verbal remarks, a representative, whether it's myself or someone else, might depend on schedule, raising something along those lines, not saying for or against any particular interpretation, but more saying, and property owners, correct me if I'm wrong, I imagine there might be a business certainty point of view value, right? Understanding the, you know, how these things will go, and for residents point of view and neighboring properties, you know, some desire to understand as well. You know, just flagging that these are potential issues that often come up in an SJRC process, do not necessarily have a way of resolution, and are things that go beyond, you know, what you might see in a office renovation project, a like-to-like use, or potential, you know, keeping ground floor retail use is the same. And Meg, I'm not sure if your hand up is still from back when it was, or if you have a comment.
Just to follow on, I'm happy to help voice that consideration to board of feedback, not necessarily pro or against a particular project, but to iterate the requirement for effective and fair ruling on the issues that come up with this project and these projects that will come out of this zoning legislation.
Carol.
My personal feeling on this, based on my experience with board meetings, is that it would be better to do a short letter rather than wait and do something verbal, because the verbal, I don't know whether you can hear the plane go. Sorry. But the verbal tends to get lost, whereas the letter becomes part of the written record. That's just my opinion.
That's a very fair point, Carol. Susan. You are muted, Susan.
Yes, sorry. Is there a way to have both? Because actually, I think it's effective for the board to hear something spoken about a desire for clarification. But if there's a letter, then it's spelled out and it's in the record.
I've frequently done both personally.
Matt G, can I ask you, I mean, and if you don't have an opinion, right, or need to confer, but how would you feel from the JBG point of view about, and again, it sounds like this has come up a little bit with the uncertainty about Pudo, about some saying something along the lines of this is a process that could use some clarifications for when these sort of things don't have a chance to come up. Or Armor, since you also brought up the concern about, the streamlined process.
Well, I mean, recognizing that I'm highly biased here, right?
Right.
I mean, I think just put that out there, but I think that it's look, it is a question of what's the trade-off, and I've never seen a policy, an Arlington County policy, or really any policy period, written with a recognition of how bad the status quo is as the adaptive reuse ordinance. Some of those slides I showed at the beginning, it is clear that the county board and the county manager recognize the severity of the commercial market disruption that is only early in its process, because these are long-term leases and there's a lot of excess stock that needs to work its way out. So the choice, sort of in front of us on any one of these projects is not between the perfect pickup drop-off solution, the perfect loading dock, which this building's not going to have, the perfect parking solution this one's going to have. It's these imperfect buildings remaining as office buildings, as vacant office buildings, and just continuing to deteriorate in place, and maybe change ownership, maybe wind up in a Key Bridge, right, Marriott situation for not for any of our buildings, but for other buildings in the county. There are certainly buildings that are at risk of that, or be reinvested in however imperfect they may be to get that next lease on life. I think that we JBG have sort of the knowledge and thick skin and ability to move through a process that maybe does take an extra 6 or 12, or in the case of River House, 36 months. But there's a lot of other, real estate investors and operators who that would be just a non-starter. We would not have the hotel in particular would not be an option for us without this process. So that's my one concern, is just not having perfect be the enemy of the good here, and that we really do have a built environment and fiscal emergency in Arlington, with the age and vacancy facing our office stock. So that's the one, that's both my bias, but also the context is that the ability to get to sort of refine over a 6 or 12-month process might be the sort of a make or break for a lot of projects that are on the margin.
So Megan, Susan, are your hands still up intentionally? No. Okay. Alexander.
So my perspective is more from just a renter's perspective. I generally side, I share a lot of the development perspective. I think, I am an Ezra Klein fan, just think about abundance. There is a really big need regionally for more housing, condos, and, I think it's very important that there's a real proper process for, things that, buildings that otherwise could be empty for months and months, and, people who really need to find housing in the area, and not being available at an affordable level. I think there's such a big affordability crisis, across Arlington and South Arlington. I really think we have to have the proper procedures to make sure that, housing gets built and it's not, trapped in, limbo for many years as it goes before, hearing and hearing and hearing, it just deters builders from getting involved. It turns investment, and we have an area that, even if, commercial building, might be going down, there's a huge residential need there. And, of young people who feel like they're kind of closed out of the housing market, because there aren't available condos. I think that this is, a greater trend among, my generation. I think it's very important that, we build in important ways. And I think, the need for the infrastructure is important, and I think that's a separate discussion. But I think, and how that county revenue, once it's generated, gets allocated. I think that's something that's very important to build up, but it's very essential that, these kind of, conversions have an easy process to go about, provided there's no inherent flaws that, the county board then has to, can interfere if there's a real urgent issue. But I think having a very clear kind of a no nonsense process where, something that makes a lot of sense can just go through without being, stuck in, kind of limbo, because I think it's a problem across all kinds of urban areas. And, it's easy to say that this one thing's the issue, but, the impact of the, a couple months across project and project and project, in Arlington, Montgomery County, DC, it has a big effect over time, and I think having, very easy processes, is pretty important for, for building housing.
Thanks, Alexander. Stacy.
Okay, so I just wanted to say, and I appreciate, Matt, your comments, but there's three parties that are sort of in the Crystal City sector plan, right? There's the development, and there's maybe two parties: the development and the public. And the government has a role to play. And if you go into that implementation matrix, there's a role that the government's supposed to be playing in this sector plan. And I don't think that they have done it. I know that the letters that were sent in the past from this CPCC board, and even the one that Mike Dowell wrote last, have, cried out for many years that that government party isn't there. They're not doing what they're supposed to do. And it didn't matter for a long time because nothing was happening for a long time, and except for the buildings were aging. But now things are happening, and that third party, the government, really needs to come to the table in the ways that the letters have outlined, because our infrastructure is getting impacted, our schools, our parks, and it's not your fault, Matt. It's what you're doing is good. That's all good things, right? It's good to have more people. It's good to have more tax revenue. It's good to have those buildings being used. But the idea, the whole idea, the central idea to the Crystal City sector plan was that it would all come up together, and like, for example, there would be tax increment financing that would go along based on the tax revenues that would be generated from these sorts of developments that would go towards improving some of our facilities. Well, I never heard of anything about that in the last few years when some of these projects have started to come online. And it's something I think we should be talking about, because unlike, these things do go hand in hand. They're not separate discussions. It all needs to come together as one whole development. So I think your predecessors in those previous letters have outlined this before. And I think as we start this new process with adaptive reuse, the fact that there's this hole that doesn't include the discussion about change of use is something that we should be definitely hitting on, and in context with what has been going on in the past, and the fact that now things are happening that are positive, that we want to make sure that it all comes up together. And I think really, I don't think it's JBG is the problem. I don't think the developers are the problem. I don't think the public's the problem. I think that sorry, Matt, I feel like the county needs to come up, step up to the table. My opinion.
So if I can jump in for a second, ahead of the line here. And we can send these after the meeting, but there are multiple links that I think we've tried to share with this group over the last 5-6 years, really, when I think the activity you're alluding to has taken off following Amazon's announcement. The hundreds of millions of dollars that have gone into this specific area for parks, for transportation, affordable housing. And I'm probably not even doing it justice and fully quantifying it, but the investment has been made there. So I think what I just heard makes it sound like it hasn't, and somehow the county's falling behind. The reality is the total need of what's really every community I think has, schools, parks, transportation, is not being met, but it doesn't mean hundreds of millions of dollars have not been invested. And I think it continue to be every 2 years when we revisit the capital improvement plan, CIP. We do, I think, do a specific job of highlighting how much of that money is going into the Pentagon City, Crystal City neighborhoods. It's something we want to keep working on, but I think I want to make sure the full context for those that are somewhat new to this group is being recognized in terms of the investment that has been made and really what attracted Amazon in the first place, because those investments were really the highlight of us putting in that effort and being that third party is what attracted Amazon in the first place, because that commitment was there from the county.
Thanks. And I'm going to ask us to try. This is obviously right. It's hard a little bit to stay because this question is a bit broader and does have these broader implications. So to focus on this one kind of specific question. And I note that we do have technically one more agenda item. So I'm going to have Judy make the last comment, and then I'm going to suggest something, and we can see if that works or doesn't work.
Okay, thank you. I'll be quick. As an aside, I'm very much an Ezra Klein fan also. But I'm glad that Arlington is finally getting on the adaptive reuse bandwagon. And that from a time standpoint, not bog projects down the way some of the newer developments have been. But our just as a back to the process a little bit, I think that our civic association in particular, for the years and years when development was going crazy, we covered every single site. And I think that I would recommend that there be both a written submission, as Carol said, for the record, and that somebody shows up to, even if all they do is read the letter, to make that point as well. And one of the comments, in addition to some of the issues that we've raised, like adjacent property owners and PUDO, there needs to be some process for public input that doesn't unnecessarily delay the process. So that I think we should make that point, and then it's up to the county staff to figure out how that can be done without adding months and layers of confusion to the process. Thanks.
Thanks. So what I'm going to recommend that we do is there'll be an attempt to draft a letter, and I use the passive voice because I may or may not be the one to do it depending on capacity, but Robert V and I will converse and try and draft something that what I'm hearing is a lot of appreciation for adaptive reuse. That actually does seem to be pretty universal, and the desire to not have vacant office buildings, and a broad but not universally held opinion that some of these issues tackled in SPRC need to have some way of, while not undermining the process the county set out for adaptive reuse and undermining the financial and process prospects that make these kind of projects possible and more viable than a tear down construction project, provide some sort of at least consideration, right? Maybe not necessarily making a recommendation for it, any particular type of process, but at least making it aware that there is a need there and the conversation happened. And then share the letter and not asking for line edits, not asking for wording, but for big red flags so that folks could feel like there is at least a fair representation of the broad viewpoints. And we'll give it a try. We'll see how that process goes. It'll be a bit of an experiment. All right, we have 11 minutes left. Rob Mandel was set to present on really interesting new data dashboard, way actually beyond, because of the BIDS resources, or Ashley actually, sorry, is going to do that. So I will ask that Ashley present. I apologize. I am someone who likes to try and be on time as much as possible for meetings. I'm also someone who really wants to make sure we have robust, active conversation, and I will be balancing that. And I also want to be respectful of Ashley's time since we asked her to join us tonight. And so ask that folks can stay on and see Ashley's presentation.
Well, good evening, everybody, and I'm so glad to be here and to introduce to you all our data dashboard. It was officially launched at our annual meeting a couple weeks ago. But basically, what we're trying to do here is accomplish a few things. We wanted to provide a one-stop shop for all market-related data and trends to National Landing, specifically that geography, the 3 neighborhoods of National Landing. Oftentimes you'll get sources of information. They may or may not align with your geography boundary. You'll have to do extra to bring that data together. And so what we're trying to do is provide this one space with that specific geography in mind. We wanted this to be accessible basically to anybody who's interested in this data. So if it's people from the public just wanting to know what's going on here from a market standpoint, or demographics, where our industries are strong, placemaking opportunities, things like that, you can find that information here. It's also hopefully useful to our investment community. Brokers, for example, could come here and find all the data that they're interested in when thinking about investing here in National Landing. And lastly, we wanted to make sure that this was a tool that is nimble and flexible for updates that may come at different time frames. So some of our some of our data comes to us on an annual basis, some comes at a quarterly basis, and some comes to us at a unforeseen time, or vague time. For example, like if retail opening says they're going to come in the fall of 2025, we don't know exactly when that's going to come, and then maybe 2 weeks out we might learn of it, and we want to make sure that we're providing the most up-to-date information to you all as soon as possible. So the data dashboard page has our dashboard itself, which is dynamic, and I'll come back to it. But it also has just an acknowledgement of lots of our businesses that have come here. We have a link to our tech and innovation events that are upcoming, that are actually being hosted here in National Landing. We want to make sure that we're highlighting noteworthy news that is relevant to our economy here. So a couple of recent things that have popped up related to technomics expanding here in National Landing. We're celebrating Concord coming, as Matt mentioned. Starburst has officially launched here as well. And then Vertus Innovation Center will be here soon. So we want to just make sure that this is also being updated in real time as news comes in. We also have a dynamic map that shows us our public and private investments when it comes to development projects parks and open space, and then mobility, because it all really relates to one another. And these just go to the project page. So if we're looking for development that is recently completed, it will be green, and you can pop on the details and it will take you to that page. And if there's a specific project page or a county page or something like that, it will be up to date here as well. And then lastly, on this page, you'll find our most recent market snapshot, or sorry, reports. We have an accompanying report for 2025 called Pulse on Innovation. I highly recommend that you take a look at it. It's a flip through book. It's very short, 20 pages. But it's a snapshot in time, obviously, but it builds on the 2023 summary report that really focused on our innovation economy. So just getting back to our dashboard, this is a choose your own adventure, and it was designed this way so that, again, any audience could access it based on what information they're looking for. So it's also designed, though, that if you brought this up on your desktop, for example, you could pull it up. It would give you dynamic information, and I won't go through all of what this is. I highly recommend that you take some time and look through everything on your own, but we want to give a summary of what the data is telling us, the story, as well as the actual data and their sources. But this is designed this way so that you could use it like a slideshow if you really wanted to. So you would just go to the next button if you'd like, and it will take you to the next thing that's on this homepage. The other way to use it is to just jump to the thing that you're interested in. So maybe I'm interested in innovation, and it will pop up everything related to that topic. So here we're highlighting our innovation specializations here. And then the ecosystem around innovation, and these are dynamic that you can click on these and it'll take you to what's being featured. So for placemaking, we're looking at daytime employee activity and some of the investments of the $12 billion of public and private investments here. What are some of the featured things? And this will take you to other pages that can go into those in more depth. Then we get into the four commercial assets: office, multifamily, hospitality, and retail. So we want to make sure that we're capturing the amount of square footage, the vacancy rates, the market trends for office by class A, and then you can click by class B and C. So this tells you the vacancy as it relates to the deliveries and the absorption. And just as Matt had mentioned about JBG Smith's absorption, we're in the negative, but you can also see that the vacancy is rising. So this is a national landing specific trend, but it's also reflected in, I guess, that what Matt was saying in the JBG Smith portfolio as well. Our asking rents and share of office space, how that's fluctuating now that we are seeing a flight to quality and our adaptive reuse. So our housing market, similar information, but we want to make sure that we're also highlighting some of our recent deliveries. Our hospitality will feature our hotel highlights, so the former Marriott and its revitalization, the office to hotel conversion at 2100 Crystal Drive, and then again the trends in every realm for hospitality. And then retail, we're looking at foot traffic, primarily the amount coming in and out, and also what has opened in the last couple of years and what's coming soon. And here we try to give a list of everything that has been delivered. So that's actually it's been fairly useful to some of our stakeholders here. So with that, I know we're right at time, so I'll stop, but I'm happy to answer any questions. And I'm also happy to have a private, separate conversation with you should you have any specific questions at any time.
Yeah, Robert V.
Yeah, not a question. Huge shout out to Ashley. I know she's of time and effort on this. I think it's very and yeah, just a huge thanks to Ashley for pulling all this together.
Thank you.
Any comments or questions?
Yeah, I do.
Susan, yeah.
This is just kind of a real quick. So, are you going to be updating this? So some things might get updated every month. Some things might be every quarter. Some things would be, it's like a year to year.
Yeah, so demographics are really the only thing that gets updated on an annual basis, and that's just because of the source that
Right.
we get our
Right.
information from. Other things, for the office, housing, hospitality, and retail, we take that at a quarterly basis. And then retail openings, I think, are the only thing, or office leases, if we get note of major office leases, we will like to highlight those in real time. So yeah, we recognize that there's some misalignment there with the updates, but we can work on ways to make sure people are informed of when there's very significant updates coming online.
Well, I think it's great. It wasn't meant as a criticism. I was just saying I spent some time going through it this afternoon, and I really appreciated all the different ways you could look at things and how easy it was to get in and see the actual information.
I'm happy about that. The other thing that's really nice about it is that it can be used on a mobile device fairly easily. So you can see how it just changes size, and you can see the information in a very streamlined way, and then be able to toggle back and forth as you go through. And then these are all dynamic on your phone. You just press it and it'll pop up with that information.
Jeff.
Yeah, I noodled around with it. I like it. It's very interesting. A lot of information there. Like Susan, I know that you're getting data from a lot of different sources, and they're updated at different periods. Is there a way to kind of look at a page of data and see when it was last updated, when the data was last pushed to it, so that you can kind of, so somebody who's looking at it can say, oh, this is new this month. Let me take a look at that. Or because some things are not going to change very often, but others, as you said, will.
Yeah, it's something that is on our radar, and we'll be talking to our web consultant to see if there's a way for us to aggregate on maybe a monthly basis or something like that. We're just going to have some internal conversations first, but you're not the first to ask. So it is something that we're considering.
And the other thing is, for some of these data sets, does it make sense to start to build a time series on them? Just thinking. I'll just throw that out there.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, I'll just say I find this is the county has its own data dashboards, but the fact that the bid has access to these kind of pay for sources is very interesting. And I think I especially found the Placer.ai data, the walks, the data using all the data we are sharing with our cell phones every day, for better or for worse. At least we can take advantage of it a little bit and see. For example, it's interesting but not surprising that the the office workers going in is going up over time, but still hasn't reached pre-pandemic. But the retail foot traffic still has not reached its 2019 peak, which I thought was very interesting and surprising.
Yeah, and you know that's also right. That has to do with our geographies as well. But and Placer is a very interesting tool. I'd be happy to go into that with anybody if they're really wanting to nerd out.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Ashley, and thank you so much to all of you. I know it is, it is asking something of you to spend your evening with each other virtually in this case, instead of with your family or just vegging out watching TV or catching up on work, all of which should be doing too. And so appreciate it. Our next meeting will be in September. Uh, I don't know, I forget the exact date off the top of my head, but it should be on your calendars. Um, and it'll be in person at Amazon Visitor Landing. So thank you to Patrick for hosting us then. We will have, or expected to have, the other Matt involved in CPCC. We're expected to have our new county board liaison, Matt DeFerenti, there as well. And we'll think about how to structure that to be a useful conversation for everyone, as well as, potentially thinking about how we could weigh in on River House, or how or if we will weigh in on River House, and could think about other agenda topics. If there are agenda items that folks want to tackle, either in September or in the future, please send Robert, Vaughn, and I an email. I will also say, I said again at the beginning, we do have some vacant seats, particularly from the business perspective, and I think particularly as we have lost some retailers in the area. The kind of ground floor retail restaurant, sort of, or we walk in sort of retail, you might call it. There's a couple of folks who I'm talking to, but really, if folks know of community-minded retailers, please let me know. We can do some reach out. These are county board ultimately appointed positions. And then I will just say this is Matt Matuzik's last meeting with us. Matt is going on, and Arlington was too big for him, so he's going to go to Small Falls Church. He just felt, it wasn't about getting a promotion to be their director of planning. He just felt that Arlington was too big of a job for him, and he'd rather deal with renovating Seven Corners and that very simple dynamic about what to do with the future of the Eden Center. So express appreciation and thanks for Matt's years of service or staffing CPCC.
Is this
You
part
get
of
me,
your
Ben. I
greater
knew it.
plan? Matt, is this part of your greater plan to get Arlington to annex Falls Church City again?
I mean, I would never admit to that on record. We can talk offline.
We'll see. There's a lot of talk of annexation between different jurisdictions in this area.
Especially on yard signs.
So unless anyone has any final comments to make, we will close out the meeting. And again, I'll express appreciation to both everyone for the really robust participation. I really appreciate that everyone was participating, and thank you for that. As well as for our presenters for taking the time to put together really informational, helpful presentations for us. So everyone have a good rest of your evening and a good 3 or so months.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thanks, everybody.